Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, of course, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Bass Pro Shops night race at Bristol Motor Speedway here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Watkins Glen, we hit our victory lane pick, Chris Buescher top 10. We also talked about betting his outright. Both Stevie and I ended up betting Chris Buescher outright at 30, 33 to 1 in that neighborhood. Chris Buescher did take the win, losing the lead to SVG, Shane Van Gisbergen, on the final restart, but getting it back in the bus stop when SVG made a little bit of a mistake there. Exciting finish to that one in what was overall kind of maybe a race that was a little less exciting than anticipated with the tire wear. Shout outs to Carson Hocevar for his first career top 3 finish, finishing third. Stevie, what were your thoughts from Watkins Glen?
I don't know. I mean, this car, it's so tough because I like Watkins Glen as a racetrack, and I'm really happy for Chris Buescher. I'm really happy to have a really good week in the betting market, but the race overall just wasn't anything like exciting to me. The tire wear was there. I mean, it did exactly what Goodyear said, right? Like, it fell off 2 to 3 seconds on a run, but it didn't matter as much. I mean, like, Michael McDowell was talking about it after qualifying and how it was more of like the tires wear was like on heat. So like when you did pit early and you cooled down running the caution laps, you really weren't at a huge disadvantage to the guys that came down and took tires. So I don't know. Would Watkins Glen had been a better race without stage cautions? Are we going back to potentially no stage cautions? Because then like the tire wear and strategy could have been a little bit more interesting. All of that to say, the end of the race was fantastic. I mean, outside of the drivers not being able to make a corner and driving, the battle between SVG and Buescher was phenomenal. I mean, SVG moved him, passed him, was faster. Buescher stayed on his bumper, put the pressure on him. SVG made a mistake. Buescher passed him. I mean, it was a phenomenal finish. And I mean, SVG is someone that is here to stay. I mean, this guy is extremely talented on these types of racetracks, and he's not going anywhere. And again, I'm happy for Chris Buescher. Right? It's been a year where I feel like Chris Buescher should have won multiple races this year. He didn't, and yeah, I mean, I'm happy for him.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely deserved the win. He had the best car. He just lost it on that restart to SVG, but at the end there, I mean, Buescher was pulling away 5 seconds on Shane Van Gisbergen until the cautions started flying. And it was, he would have run away with the win there had the cautions not flown. So definitely had the best car. It'll be interesting to see what happens when we go to our final road course race of the season at the Charlotte Roval. But this week, we're going to one of the best races of the year, hopefully, the Bristol night race, of course, at Bristol Motor Speedway. Bristol, a little more than a half-mile track, steeply banked concrete oval. You always get a lot of action there at Bristol. The line can sometimes move around or change throughout the race, where the low line is good early and then maybe the high line is better late as things rubber in. And then maybe if they sweep or don't sweep things, that could change around a little bit, but usually it ends up around the top at the end of the race, but should be multiple groups of racing, at least at some points during the race. So, Stevie, the big question here, of course, is what is the racing going to be like at Bristol? Is it going to be more like last year's playoff race, or is it going to be more like this year's spring race where we had some tire issues?
I think my answer to you is yep. I mean, like, we're going to talk about it as we're going through our picks this week, as far as just like making sure to bankroll management this race and pay attention to practice and qualifying. Like, I don't know what to really expect. If we go back to the spring, there was a ton of tire wear. You and I were talking pre-show that the track wasn't taking rubber at all. They did a tire test here, and the track wasn't taking rubber at all. So, I mean, it's resin instead of PJ1. I don't know what to expect. And we get a long practice session with all the cars in the same practice session this week. I feel like that is the most important part of information this week from the betting side, from the DFS side. Like, you have to pay attention to that stuff. I mean, if we go back to last year, there was 3 drivers that led over 100 laps, Hamlin, Bell, Gibbs. So, I mean, those are the guys you kind of expect to be fast anyway. But yeah, I mean, overall for me, it's kind of a wait and see week. I don't have a lot of early week bets, and I feel like I have no idea what to expect from the tire this week.
Yeah, I don't either. Obviously, we saw the cording issues in the spring, and it seemed like it was from maybe a combination of factors. It was cooler temperatures. I think the high was like 63 degrees for the Bristol race, and only got cooler throughout the race. Um, there was, no rubber really on the track. But I think, just the cooler temperatures produced higher speeds at Bristol, which increases the load on the car. And the tire wear we were seeing at Bristol wasn't your normal tire wear. It wasn't just like tire fall off. It was like actual cording because the tires couldn't handle the loads that were being put on them from, I think, a combination of factors. So we'll have to see. Obviously, it's going to be in the 80s at Bristol as far as the high during the day. It is the night race. It'll cool off some, but it's still going to be hotter. There will be other series running, so there could be more rubber in the track. We did see kind of in that first Cup race in the spring, it was, the tire wear got better. The cording got better towards the final stint of the race there. So maybe it won't be as bad this time. We'll just have to see. So it's going to be an interesting deal with the tires. But other than that, tires aside, how are we handicapping Bristol? What do we usually do here for Bristol Motor Speedway?
Yeah, I mean, we look at Dover. Dover is a decent comp to Bristol. They're both concrete, steep tracks. And just really quick, not to like harp too much, but like they're going back to the spring, 5 cars finished on the lead lap. Like that is not a normal NASCAR race in this generation of NASCAR. So wild race. But yeah, I mean, we look at Dover and recent Bristol races. This is a tire that we've run here before, and we haven't had a ton of issues. So I think we're looking at past data. From that, we could go back and we could look at like who ran well at Dover, because I think Dover is the best comp just in general. So like you can maybe use Dover race from April a little bit more than the Bristol race from earlier this year because of all the tire issues. And I mean, Denny Hamlin won that race. And if you look at like who ran well at Dover, it was the same people that typically run well at Bristol. So using Dover, using recent Bristol data, not weighing the spring race as much as I typically would, because I mean, it had nothing to do with speed. It was like who can maintain their stuff the longest in that race. So that's what I'm doing this week.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we talk about that spring race, right? Martin Truex Jr. finished second. He's never been good at Bristol. Finished second because he knew how to manage his tires. We saw the top 3 drivers, even really the top 4, all veterans. Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr. Were third and second. Obviously, Denny won. Alex Bowman in fourth. It's definitely a lot of guys with experience managing tires that finished up there. So I agree with you. I don't think I'm weighing the first Bristol race as much. Definitely like using Dover. Obviously, past Bristol, not counting the one earlier this year. And just steep track performance in general. Homestead and Darlington have a little bit of correlation as well. I find when I pull those in, I get better predictions in my model, out of sample predictions in my model. So, definitely like using those as well, which always ends up making me a little bit higher in a couple drivers, but I still like them. I still think, and we'll talk about who those drivers are. I still think they're going to be good here. So yeah, I don't have anything else for as far as a Bristol preview. Stevie, what about you?
Nothing for Bristol, but I feel like we need to at least like bring up the playoffs,
right.
man. Like what a wild first 2 races of the round. I mean, look who's sitting outside looking in. We talked last week about like Briscoe potentially needing to win to get in, and he comes into Bristol +6. Like what? It's been a wild round. I don't think there's going to be many brackets that are going to be perfect after this first round.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a bracket busting round for sure. And NASCAR kind of set it up that way. I mean, they put a bracket busting first round of tracks, right? With a drafting track, a road course where we brought new tires, and Bristol, which always produces chaos, one of the lowest predictability races of the season, especially outside of drafting tracks. Bristol actually has the lowest predictability in terms of my models, that, just being able to predict the outcomes. And that's part of it. I guess that's an intangible. Bristol's very hard to predict. A lot of chaos happens at Bristol, even in more recent years where there maybe hasn't been as much chaos. There's still been chaos at Bristol. So, it's definitely on the lower side of predictability. So longer shots or just more caution with your approach, like you said, in unit size, bankroll management. But Stevie, these playoffs are crazy. Like, Joey Logano's through, obviously. Buescher wasn't even a playoff driver. But in terms of the actual points, Christopher Bell leads. But then the next 4 drivers in points are Austin Cindric, Joey Logano, who, finished 15th in points in the regular season, if you're not counting wins, Alex Bowman, and Daniel Suarez. If you told me that'd be the top 5 in points, I'd have told you you're absolutely crazy. We have Denny Hamlin on the outside looking in. We have Martin Truex Jr. on the outside looking in. We have Brad Keselowski on the outside looking in. All behind Ty Gibbs and Chase Briscoe. And Ty Gibbs and Chase Briscoe are tied for that final spot, both on the inside, though. So Denny Hamlin sitting 6 points behind them, Brad Keselowski 12 behind them, and Martin Truex Jr. 14 behind them. I don't have any predictions on who's going to go through, but it's going to be interesting because that whole bubble from Truex all the way through Briscoe, anybody could be in or out in the blink of an eye. And that doesn't even count some of these other guys that are a little bit of a tier ahead of them. But if William Byron or Kyle Larson has an early crash and they don't get stage points, they're probably not making it through either.
I don't think anybody outside of like Austin Cindric, Christopher Bell, Alex Bowman feel any kind of like somewhat safe outside of Joey Logano, obviously. But like Tyler Reddick down, 30 points is not enough because it's Bristol. You could go out and wreck the first stage and, be in a really bad spot. Denny, Brad, and Truex have the upside to win. I think Denny and Brad more than Truex, but I think Martin Truex Jr. is going to miss the next round. I think it's going to be really sad to see him get eliminated from the first round in his final season, but I think that's what's going to happen. And then I think Ty Gibbs is going to squeak by, and I think Denny's going to squeak by, and I think it's going to be Briscoe, Keselowski, Truex, and Burton that miss the next round. But that's if nothing happens. Yeah,
it's tough to say. Briscoe's good here. Brad Keselowski's great here. It's going to be a tough round. It's going to, and that, like you said, that's if nothing happens. If something, like I said, if Kyle Larson crashes in stage 1 or Ryan Blaney crashes in stage 1, we've seen that before. We've seen Ryan Blaney go out and lead over 100 laps, get caught up in lap traffic crashing, and not even win stage 1. It's crazy. So, anything can happen. We'll definitely be keeping an eye out on the playoff picture. But it is time to dive into our Bristol bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Bristol, 4 turns, 1 pick from Stevie, 1 from me per turn before we drive into victory lane. So we're going to throw the green flag on the Bass Pro Shops night race and dive into turn 1. All right, turn 1, Stevie. I'm going to start this one off. I'm going to start turn 1 off. I know we usually start with you. I don't have a turn 1 pick. My turn 1 pick, and this is what we talked about at the top, be conservative. We don't really know what's going to happen with the tires here. We're going to get a 45-minute practice session. That is going to help us a lot. We are going to be able to understand if teams think the cording issues or the wear issues are going to happen. We're going to be able to see who's fast, which is really nice. That is going to give us a lot of information. Yes, obviously the books will adjust on that information, but we've seen all the time. The books over adjust for qualifying or under adjust for this, that, or the other. And we can find ways to take advantage after practice and qualifying. So right now, my personal approach, and I know, Stevie, your approach has been pretty similar, don't bet a ton. And if you do, typically with more uncertainty, like we said, we want to take a little bit longer shots because of the uncertainty. Longer shots are maybe more likely to hit than the odds than they're actually being given. So we don't have a single minus odds pick on here on the outline. We do both each have a couple of long shots, 2 or 3 long shots each. So that's just going to be my turn 1 advice, is just take it easy. It's Bristol. We're going to enjoy the race anyway. You don't necessarily have to have bets on it going into the week to enjoy the race. You can have it post practice and qualifying, or you can just enjoy the race and not bet a ton, if any, on it, because it's going to be a great race. It's going to be dramatic. There's going to be like we just talked about, a dramatic playoff picture. So just be conservative. Don't get too crazy here for Bristol.
Yeah, I mean, I have not bet any outrights this week, and I don't know if I will because the people you want to bet outrights on, not showing any value on those drivers. And I want to wait and see. So, like, a lot of my bets are going to be based off of having some tire wear. And if we don't have tire wear, I'll probably add some stuff after practice and qualifying. But if we do have tire wear, I might not add anything. I might just let some of these tire wear bets that I have ride and not add any outrights, Like, we love betting. We love betting NASCAR. We love trying to make money. But yeah, I mean, this is one of those weeks where you already talked about how unpredictable Bristol is anyway, and now it's just there's a lot of uncertainty. And I mean, if Denny or Keselowski is running second and they're behind the cutoff line, like they're going to move somebody. I mean, the right way. There's a Bristol move that is not an Austin Dillon move. So I feel like you just got to be careful with your bets this week.
Absolutely. Got to be careful with your bets this week. But with that said, we are getting to your turn one pick, but it's kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about. It is a little bit of a longer shot. What do you got here?
Yeah, I have Michael McDowell for a top 10 at 4-1, so plus 400. I like this. He's someone that I bet a half a unit on for a top 10 here. I think that this is a spot where you could just kind of take advantage of how well he's qualified. I mean, he continues to qualify. I believe I'm allergic to Michael McDowell's top 10s. Michael McDowell, top 10. He has an average finish of 9.3. He's finished 11th, 6th, and 11th in the 3 next-gen races this year without dirt. So I think if you're just looking at someone that has some top 10 upside at longer odds, you could take a shot on him. And again, it's a qualifying thing. Like this team has figured out qualifying. They've done really well at qualifying. They qualified well at Dover earlier this year. Before he had all the issues, he qualified 8th in that race. So, and Ford was really good in qualifying here earlier this year, just in general. So, yeah, I mean, Blaney, Berry, Logano, Briscoe, McDowell. Ford had, 4 or 5 drivers in the top 7 in qualifying. So, I mean, 4-1 seems like a nice little bet here on McDowell. Again, half a unit on this one, not going crazy on this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, he's looked really good at Bristol in the next-gen era. I think I saw some stats from Greg Mathern at Win the Race about his top 10 percentage, percentage of laps run in the top 10 was like 7th most at Bristol in the next-gen era. So really like that pick there on Michael McDowell. For turn 2, Stevie, we have some interesting manufacturer bets. So let's dive into turn 2. All right, turn 2. You're betting on a couple manufacturers here to win the race. What do you got?
Yeah, so I want to bet both of these. I don't want to bet just one of these. I want to bet both of these. And I'm going to bet Ford at plus 230 and Chevy at plus 210 to win this race. So I'm looking to bet 2 units here. And if either one of them win, I'm obviously winning a little bit of money. And Toyota, we're going against 6 drivers, and I think we can kind of cross off a couple of those drivers. So if we look at this field, we definitely think that like Toyota probably has the best chance to win when we're looking at the drivers that have a chance to win this race. Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, Ty Gibbs is really fast here. But then like we're kind of taking away like Martin Truex Jr., who doesn't typically run really well here. So, and Bubba Wallace, as much as I like Bubba, this hasn't been one of his best tracks. John Hunter was fast here in the spring, but that tire wear was definitely a factor into how well John Hunter ran. So you're looking at like Denny Hamlin, Bell, maybe Ty Gibbs going up against like Larson, Buescher. Chase Elliott's been good here. Brad Keselowski's really good here. So, I mean, it's just more of like, I feel like when we're getting this kind of odds, we just play the math game. I know you're Captain Math over there, and I feel like this is a Captain Math Nick bet here. So I like Chevy at plus 210, Ford at plus 230, and just hoping that a Toyota, one of those like 3 or 4 Toyotas, don't win this race.
Yeah, I love this play, actually, and this might be one I do end up tailing with you. I just think this is really good. This is Captain Math type stuff, like you said. It's just car counts, right? And if there's only 3 or 4 Toyotas that can win, you're betting on 32, 33 other cars, something like that to win. That's a lot more comfortable there. So Yeah, I like this play. So my turn 2 pick is a Toyota, though, but I'm not taking him to win. I'm taking Tyler Reddick for the top Toyota at plus 950. And the reason I'm doing this is that way I get to avoid all those really good Fords, those really good Chevys, your Larsons, your Keselowskis, your Buschers out there. And, this is a situation where I talked about it a little bit in the preview, using the steep tracks. Tyler Reddick always pops on the steep tracks. And for some reason, people overlook him at Bristol. He finished 4th his rookie year at Bristol with Richard Childress Racing. That is a darn good accomplishment. He DNF'd the other Bristol race that year. He finished 36th, but finished 4th with Richard Childress Racing as a rookie. 2021, he finished 12th. 2022, it wasn't very good. He finished 25th. And 2023 was when he was joined 2311 Racing. He finished 15th. And earlier this year, he finished 30th. But the tire stuff, I think we can discount that. If we go back to Xfinity, Tyler Reddick won at Bristol in Xfinity, right? Like, he is pretty good here. So I think he's just, maybe not had the best runs in the Cup Series. And I don't necessarily think it's because he's bad here. I think it's just hasn't worked out. Maybe incorrect setups or just getting shuffled in the wrong places, the wrong times, or driving over his head a little bit just because he's pretty aggressive. But Tyler Reddick's good here. I think we're going to see Tyler Reddick contend for a win one of these days at Bristol. So I want to get on it before it happens. And with, like you said, with Truex struggling here, traditionally with John Hunter Nemechek and Eric Jones not really being top Toyota threats, I wouldn't think. All of a sudden we're talking about maybe 4 or 5 Toyotas that really can contend for top Toyota. We're getting them 9.5 to 1.
Yeah, I like Reddick on steep tracks as well. I'm with you. He's always someone that pops for me on steep tracks, and he's kind of had a rough go at Bristol, but it's been incident driven. It hasn't been driver driven. So, he was leading the race earlier this year, and Ty Gibbs went around the outside of him and got him loose and ended up spinning, and it ruined his day. He was a top 5 car early in that race. So, I have no issues with this. I think Denny is the favorite when it comes to top Toyota, and I think Ty Gibbs is probably second, looking at how fast Ty Gibbs has been here. But what happens if Ty Gibbs is in a good playoff spot? He's not going to push it if he doesn't have a chance to win the race potentially, and Denny might push it too much. We've documented how Denny always seems like in these big pressure situations he pushes it too much and doesn't always perform at the peak. I want to see Denny advance. I think some of my Toyota bets and Joe Gibbs bets would definitely prefer Denny getting into the next round. But yeah, I don't hate this at all. Tyler Reddick's good on steep tracks.
Yeah, that's just the thinking there. He's great on steep tracks. He's been good at Bristol in the past. I think just he gets not enough credit for how good he is here because of some of the finishes that he's had. So turn 2, Stevie is on Chevy and Ford to win at plus 210 and plus 230. For me, I'm on Tyler Reddick, top Toyota, plus 950. That means we're halfway through a quick lap at Bristol. Got half a lap to go, so let's dive into turn 3. All right, turn 3, Stevie. Back half of the track, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Mr. Hendersonville, Tennessee himself, Josh Berry, top 10 at plus 155. I've talked all year, and you guys are all probably sick of hearing me talk about Josh Berry and how much of a difference Rodney Childress makes and everything. But steep tracks and Dover, good racetracks for Josh Berry in the Xfinity Series. Rodney Childress has been bringing fast race cars to the track all year. It really hasn't mattered. Bristol won top 10 in 3 races, but he won Dover, and he finished top 5 in Dover, all 3 of his Xfinity races. So looking back at the Cup race from earlier this year, he had really good speed at Dover as well. And even if we look back at the Bristol race from earlier this year, Josh Berry was a top 15 car almost all race. We know that Josh Berry is really good at managing his tires. So if it does become a race where managing your tires is something that we have to worry about this weekend at Bristol, I think Josh Berry is someone that can run inside the top 10 and do that. So he led 25 laps. He had 21 fastest laps earlier this year. I think top 10 for Josh Berry is very much in the realm of possibilities. And I want to jump on this one before we see practice and qualifying, because I think it could potentially get down to the 125 mark. And I want to get this one at 155.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh Berry, I mean, he qualified really well in that first Bristol race as well. So even more incentive to bet it early. He started on the row there with Ryan Blaney. So 2 Fords starting on the front row earlier this year at Bristol. Always do the Hendersonville, Tennessee parlay. Of course, Josh Berry top 10. Another person that went to Hendersonville High School was Taylor Swift. So maybe Travis Kelce, anytime touchdown, parlay with that with Josh Berry top 10. If you
There
want
you
to
go.
have a little fun. But no, in all seriousness, for my turn 3 pick, I'm going to go to the guy who's been top forward each of the last 2 years in the Bristol playoff race, and that's Chris Buescher, top forward, plus 450. I just said it. He's been top forward each of the last 2 Bristol playoff races. He's plus 450. I don't have anything more than that. He's great here. Finished 7th earlier this year, even with the tire wear stuff, which I don't think a lot of people were predicting. So he was just fine here earlier this year as well. And I think if there's less tire wear, that actually plays even more into his favor. So if this is more like the past couple Bristol playoff races, I like this even better for Chris Buescher. So yeah, Buescher, back-to-back Buescher. He seems always this time of year to come alive. Won 3 races around this time last year. Won this Bristol race. It's not just top forward, but won the race 2 years ago here. So I'm going to take Chris Buescher top forward plus 450.
I was looking at a way to get Buescher exposure this week, and this is probably what I'm going to end up doing as well, because I like Chris Buescher a lot. He's being a little bit overvalued as far as like outright numbers and stuff, where I can't necessarily pull the trigger, and I'll probably regret it. But the only scenario I'm going to throw at you that's going to tilt both of us now that I'm probably going to tail you on this is Keselowski's 5th, Buescher's 4th, 10 laps to go. Keselowski needs 1 spot to advance. Buescher lets him go by. We tilt. I mean, if it happens, it happens. It's not something you can predict, but I just see the tilt coming from a late race, Keselowski passing Buescher for top forward. But yeah, I mean, I like this. Chris Buescher is really good at this racetrack, and he is someone you're like, all the playoff drivers are very happy he didn't make it, because this is where like he's going to have a ton of momentum going, especially coming off of a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely a concern. I mean, it's the same thing with Tyler Reddick with Denny Hamlin right behind him. If Denny Hamlin needs that point, right? Same concern there. But we're getting long enough odds that I still think it's worth it, because so many things happen in this track. It's a pretty small chance, that these drivers are running right near each other at the end where it happens. But it certainly can. We've seen it happen in the past. We saw it happen, I mean, under yellow for Denny Hamlin getting 1 extra stage point in just this past weekend at Watkins Glen. Bubba Wallace pitted while the pits were closed just to give Denny Hamlin an extra stage point. So all sorts of things can happen, playoff shenanigans, but I still like it. It's long odds. Chris Buescher, top forward, plus 450. So 1 more turn to go, and that's turn 4. All right, last turn. We got one here, Stevie. Double-digit odds. I love this. I actually have been eyeing this myself. What are you on?
I got a funsy bet. It wouldn't be Bristol, and it wouldn't be a podcast that we're talking about being conservative without a funsy bet. And I have one of those this week. It's Justin Haley for a top 10 at 100 to 1. I only bet 0.1 units on this. Like, it's just not like a bet I'm going to throw a ton of money on, but it's fun. It's a fun bet. If we do have a ton of tire wear, and he's going to be slow enough where he could kind of manage his tires and not be up there in the mix and have a ton of tire wear. So, I mean, he ran top 15 most of the race earlier this year with all the tire wear. So, yeah, I mean, this is just a funsy bet. There's been a lot of talk about RFK getting a 3rd car and Justin Haley being in that 3rd car. I feel like he's performed way better than we all kind of expected this year with the Rickware Racing equipment. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just a Justin Haley fan. I think he's a wheelman. And if there's chaos, embrace the chaos with a funsy bet. That was my thought process on this one. So I got Justin Haley for a top 10 at 100 to 1, just because I think it's fun.
I agree. I like it. Yeah, and if there's tire wear, I mean, both Justin Haley and Kaz Grala were running inside the top 10 at various points in that earlier spring race. Kaz Grala was legitimately running like 7th at various points in that race. They both fell off a little bit at the end, kind of, I think, as A, the intensity and pace picked up, and B, the tire management didn't become as big of an issue in the final stint there. but they were close enough to where if, you got the right cautions and trapped some guys laps down, there may have only been 12 or 13 cars in the lead lap and they would have been one of them. So definitely like Justin Haley 10-1 as a little funsy bet. My turn 4 pick is also a funsy bet. I can't not bet on Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for a top 10 finish at Bristol. It's just my auto bet. I auto bet Ricky Stenhouse Jr. to win at drafting tracks. Auto bet Ricky Stenhouse Jr. top 10 at Bristol. Those are my Ricky Stenhouse Jr. auto bets. I mean, look at Ricky Stenhouse Jr. You finished 10th in this race last year, and he has finishes of second, fourth, ninth in his career here at Bristol. He has not had as many good finishes with JTG Doherty, but 4 of those were DNFs, and the other 2 were a 10th and a 20th, right? So 50% of the time when he doesn't have issues, he's finished inside the top 10. But prior to that, he's always been amazing at Bristol. He's been great at Dover. We saw earlier this year he was really fast at Dover, had problems last year, finished really well at Dover 15th, and the year before that finished 2nd at Dover in the next gen era for his his 3 finishes. So I think this is a spot where it's Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Bristol. I'm just always going to play him 6-1 for a top 10 finish on RSJ.
Yes, 7 top 10s and 20 races here. This is a really good racetrack for him, like you said. Talladega, I think, is his best average finish, and that makes a lot of sense. He has 7 top 5 finishes at Talladega. So, but yeah, I mean, Bristol has been a fantastic racetrack for him. I'm right there with you. Like, the downside with Ricky Stenhouse is, like, he always seems to find issues. I mean, if we go back to the spring race, I think he was in like 3 or 4 of the cautions. So, yeah, but like when he has clean races, like he has top 5 upside at a racetrack like this. He's actually really good at steep tracks. We talk about the dirt guys and how good the dirt guys are on steep tracks, and this is a steep track, and Stenhouse is a dirt guy. Like as much as we overlook that sometimes, I mean, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a dirt guy.
That's true. Very true. And I love that stat. 7 top 10s in 20 Bristol non-dirt starts. That's, that's approaching like plus 135 territory or something like that. In terms of his long-term career odds, if you just bet him top 10 every race, you'd have made money if he was plus 135 or longer every race. And that's just crazy. And he's 6-1. So Ricky Stenhouse Jr., top 10 finish, 6-1. That means we only have one thing left to do, and of course, drive in the victory lane. So, Stevie, what is our victory lane pick?
Hey, we hit it last week, so why not go back to a top 10? We're going to go back to a top 10 here. Again, like I haven't bet any outright, so it just doesn't feel right to like bet or talk about an outright for a victory lane. So we have Alex Bowman for a top 10 at plus 160. We talk all the time about how good Alex Bowman is on high tire wear racetracks. He's also really good at steep tracks. He's someone that flies under the radar. He doesn't typically have like race winning upside at steep tracks, but he's someone that can run inside the top 10. He's been hit or miss here at Bristol. A lot of that has to do with incidents, but I mean, this guy finished 4th earlier this year. He ran top 10. He managed his tires. And I mean, this is a race car driver where he's plus 41. I don't think he pushes it. I think he's conservative, and I think that's exactly what you need to do to run in that like 8 to 12 range, and we're getting it at plus 160. So I just think Alex Bowman's going to maintain his stuff this week, try not to have any issues, and advance to the next round, which potentially leads to a top 10. So I'm going to take it at plus 160.
Yeah, I like that look. And obviously he finished 4th earlier this year. He finished 13th in this race last year, DNF the year before, but prior to that, 5th again, and then a 16th. So he's always right around that top 10, if not inside or even in that top 5. And he's in a spot here where he doesn't want to push it, like you said. So he's not going to be aggressive. He's not going to get into incidents. He probably is only going to have issues if there's something wrong on pit road or he gets caught up in somebody else's mess that isn't his own fault. But he has no reason to beat and bang and try to, force the deal or anything like that. He'll just take what comes to him. And when that happens, very often you can just ride around at Bristol. And as long as nobody else does anything dumb around you, you can just ride around, finish on the lead lap. And very often finishing on the lead lap will get you in the top 10. I think there's been something like an average of 12 or 9 cars or whatever it is on the lead lap at the end of these Bristol races in the next gen era. I don't remember the exact number, but I remember it's very low. Jordan Maccabee of Rotoballer talked about it. So yeah, just riding around and keeping it clean would be good enough for Alex Bowman to have a strong chance of finishing on the lead lap. And if that's the case, you're almost surely finishing in the top 10. So that will do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Bass Pro Shops night race at Bristol Motor Speedway on Running Hot, Action Network's Motorsports Betting Podcast. We'll be back this time next week to talk bets for the Hollywood Casino 400 at Kansas. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.